It looks like it is up. I'm trying to find out if the audio and video is on.
Okay.
I can see you.
Okay. Well, that's good.
And I can hear you.
All right. Cool. Again, when we go through these things, let's go ahead and repost this. I haven't put it out on Truth Social. So let me do this. Come on in to what I think is funny is now I've typed Operation Gladio on my phone so many times, it pre-populates that for me, which is kind of a new thing. And the same thing with the Colonel's Corner. It just comes up as now like my new favorite words. I'm going to give Stellar a co-host until we find Cousin It and see if her computer stuff is working today. Okay. Let me also post this over on True Social real quick. And then we're going to get going. All right. So, as I have said throughout this series, what happens is as I do digging, I come across NGOs, the non-governmental organizations, like the National Endowment for Democracy, USAID, blah, blah, blah. And many times you have to take a second when you're doing the digging in order to do a little exploration about when were they set up, what else was going on at the time, so you can figure out what their role is in the bigger scheme of Operation Gladio and where they fit in uh, the context of it. For example, I was just working on a thread and noticed that there's some very interesting timing of what was going on in the early 70s operationally and the creation of BCCI, which was the money laundering bank. And while I kind of knew it in the back of my head, it like came full circle for me today, where it was in the 1970 timeframe that Nixon announced his war on drugs and started implementing basically the decimation of the Corsican mafia, which had a lock on the production of number 4 heroin, which evidently is like the highest refined white snow, whatever, has lots of different names. And by literally assassinating over 300 French mafia figures that ran the Corsican mafia and the production facilities in the Marseille area of France, moved that production capability down to Sicily under the control of the CIA's Sicilian mafia counterparts. And interestingly enough, that completely expanded, like grew times 100, their monopoly over the heroin / drug trade worldwide. And at the exact same time in 1972, BCCI is created. And while I had both of those dates, it wasn't until I was writing this post today that I was like, oh, son of a gun. That's not coincidental timing, because we've already talked about the fact that much of the Vatican money laundering capability during this period was saturated. They were having to create fake banks. They were having to create shell companies. And Marcinkus, the former Archbishop of Chicago, while well versed in how this operates because of him doing banking with the Mafia Bank in Chicago, was moved to the Vatican to oversee the Vatican Bank. And he, like I said, he's familiar with how this process works. However, the amount was like times 5 every couple of years, growing leaps and bounds, and it far surpassed the Vatican's ability as a single banking front in order to money launder all of the existing material. So, having said that, I found a website that had, and I found some odd things on there. So I would tell anybody looking at this website, it's called the Institute for the Study of Globalization and Covert Politics, to take things with a grain of salt as far as looking your own stuff up. But there was one particular organization that I kind of wanted to go over today, because I think it says a lot about Operation Gladio in general. So the name of this organization is called the American Security Council, Cold War Joint CIA, FBI, Pentagon Front, involved in illegal operations. So they have a picture on the website called Cold War Warriors, Anti-Communist Group Lobbies to Keep U.S. Military a Superpower. And of course, anytime I see the phrase anti-communist, my ears perk up because that's the mantra for where they hid all of the Operation Gladio information. So, again, there's these telltale signs, and it doesn't mean every single time the term anti-communist is used that that's what that means, but it is one of those neon lights that flash when I see, for example, we talked about the World Anti-Communist League that was set up in Taiwan by Chiang Kai-shek. Neon flashing light, guys. Anytime you see, they had the Caribbean version of the World Anti-Communist League. They had a South American version of that. They used that NGO in order to disguise coordination meetings around the globe on conducting Operation Gladio missions. And if you just do the cursory look into the World Anti-Communist League in who set it up, the timing of when it was set up, everything about it is a neon glowing blinking light saying I'm Operation Gladio. So that's just one of those hints, and you pick up lots of these hints as you go digging into Operation Gladio. So this particular organization, there's a quote here. It says, "My son was tortured to death in front of my eyes. She finally told me one day, quote, to force me to tell them where some students were hiding. I didn't know, but they killed him anyway. He was the one who burned out my son's eyes, him." And she's pointing to a picture of Enrique Bermudez, Bermudez. He was one of the American Security Council's death squad friends from Nicaragua and Honduras during the whole Contra garbage. He was also the boss of Danilo Blandon, Blandon, responsible for CIA's crack cocaine epidemic in the U.S. by selling tons of cocaine at bargain prices to Bloods and Crip gangs. That was reported in the New York Times in May 1991. CIA and this American Security Council backed death squads in El Salvador also was in part backfired in the extreme violence of the MS-13 gang in the US. And I would take issue with the word backfired because to me, this is intent. It is not a fallout, like an unexpected side effect. This strategy of tension and the ability to create havoc in order for you to marshal through your real missions is imperative to the whole Operation Gladio strategy. So you have to have violence. You have to have pitting people against each other so that you can have a strategy of tension to keep people in fear in order for them to seek solutions from the state. So the creation of the MS-13 was not a backfire. It was actually the mission. And that's what I'm saying. And that's why I like going over these things with you guys, because I want to make sure that you guys understand there is an evil intent here where most people that write about these things write about them in a way that's really naive. And I guess if you're just writing about this one particular group, you can naively think that it's ill-intended side effect. But once you're on your 27th group, you can't pretend like that's a unexpected side effect when they set these things up. Okay. Another quote that was used is a new director's crusade against death squads was followed by the murder of a counselor and 6 children. When the workers complain, they end up in a ditch, said Alan Nairn, a longtime reporter in Latin America with a regional newspaper. Quote, soldiers would take the surviving children of the workers to local charities, unquote. And let me also just point out here, in most of these situations, and I'm going to tell you who wrote this in just a second. But in most of these situations where these children were left orphaned, they actually sold them to some of the workers that were down there in order for them to be taken out of the country. True human trafficking on a scale that we have not even wrapped our arms around. This quote was written by a CIA death squad leader, Roberto Arzu. He also was one of the American Security Council contacts in Latin America. So this quote says, in partnership with Covenant House, who we've come across multiple times, that was a New York-based orphanage with a gay headmaster that did hideous child abuse. His name was Father Bruce Ritter. He was a board member of AmeriCares with the Bush family, and obviously now the Biden family. Brzezinski was involved in this, as was a guy by the name of Eagleburger. He actually worked directly with Kissinger. J. Peter Grace was part of the board of this charity, Covenant House. Colin Powell, General Richard Stilwell, who also, by the way, was a member of this American Security Council, and American Security Council Chairman Robert Galvin, Galvin, was on both. And this Covenant House was revealed to be part of an international child trafficking ring by Senator John DeCamp. That was reported on October 7th, 1990 in Newsday. And of course, we have right now going on with AmeriCares in Guatemala, the lawsuit that is charging child trafficking currently. And the article that Newsday wrote in 1990, you're not going to believe the name of the article. War for the Children, Guatemala Covenant House confronts death squad. So what was going on in 1990 is still currently going on today. That's the kind of stuff that just drives me crazy. So where did American Security Council come from? It was founded in 1954 under the name Mid-American Research Library. Although the American Security Council does not advertise with it, the Mid-American Research Library was the continuation of the library of the American Vigilant Intelligence Federation. And see, that's the thing that just cracks me up. If you knew that was the name and that's what was behind it, American Security Council is so nebulous. It's so not offensive, so not neon light. But if you had something that was associated with the American Vigilant Intelligence Federation, that might raise an eyebrow. A guy by the name of Harry Jung, Jung, was head of that federation. He got sick and died in 1954. So Robert E. Wood, who was the outgoing chairman of Sears and Roebuck, and we've ran across him multiple times in our international syndicate, had begun to anticipate the secretive headquarters of this Intelligence Federation entity being placed in Chicago Tribune's tower, and that he thought that was like a good place for it. He delegated the task of approaching other company heads to John M. Fisher, who was VP of Personnel and Employee Relations at Sears. Fisher was able to bring on board 25 other companies, including Motorola, Marshall Field, Illinois Central Railroad, and together these corporations put up the money to buy the library, rebranding it as Mid-American Research Library. Fisher became CEO, with the most important financiers organizing themselves into an advisory board. Fisher changed the name to American Security Council in 1955. This name was more fitting, as the new foundation was considerably more than just a neutral research library. The original American Vigilant Intelligence Federation, which had been founded way back in 1919. Gosh, that's weird. That's like right around World War I. And had everything from the New Deal information, the creation of labor unions in there, and US's involvement in World War II. He denied it, but there's every indication that the original guy, Wong, Jung, was also editor for the American Gentile, an anti-Semitic newspaper owned by Russian immigrants from Tsarist Russia. These white Russian contacts provided him early on with copies of the Protocol of the Learned Elders of Zion, and together they worked on an English translation. So Wong was usually accused of anti-Semitism and being a Nazi sympathizer. At the very least, he was a prominent isolationist and is said to have had contact with the leadership of another NGO that we come across all the time, ironically enough, called America First Committee. And we're going to do another show on America First Committee, because I think it's absolutely hysterical when you look at how that NGO actually came to be. At the time of this article, it was headed by General Robert Wood. And again, my problem with all of this is the freaking interaction with our military and what is clearly the tenets of fascism being set up inside of the United States. And it's just like riddled with our senior military people. His friend, Colonel Richard McCormick, the publisher of the Chicago Tribune newspaper. So they worked on it together. And that's the same McCormick who became notorious for leaking U.S. war plans against fascist nations 3 days before the attack on Pearl Harbor. That's very interesting. So Harry Hong also worked in cooperation with the FBI and on occasion acted as an advisor to, or a mentor in probably a better word to use, for junior FBI agents. The primary reason for the FBI's interest in him seems to have stemmed from the fact that he collected one of the largest, most complete files on subversive activities in this library. One can wonder if General Robert Wood, who used to be chairman of the isolationalist America First Committee during World War II, came up with the idea to acquire the library from Wong. It appears to have been a friend. So Wong appears to have been a friend of Hoover's, and we all know him from being in the FBI. In turn, John Fisher, who took control of the library, had retired as a special FBI special agent in 1953, the year before he took over the library. He also picked up an army of former FBI agents to be part of this Security Council. 3 early in a row operating directors were all FBI agents. And specifically, they all had counterintelligence experience. The research director was an FBI agent, and so were various members of the senior advisory committee. For example, we have Stephen Donchess, Donchess, who had become a low-level manager at U.S. Steel. Kenneth Piper, former assistant, excuse me, director of the FBI, who later in life became the VP of Motorola, and Russell White, who had been associated with the FBI and then got a job with General Electric as a security consultant. And of course, we know General Electric is part of the international syndicate. They've came up repeatedly in our investigations. Fisher also set up the for-profit firm called Fidel IFAX, FIDELIFAX. And this had offices across the hall in the same building as the American Security Council. And so Fidel IFAX is important because I've come across it a couple of times. And one of the things you notice when you're exploring Operation Gladio is their 100% monopolization of everything telecommunication, right? So one of the primary things this international company called ITT did was it went in and bought up countrywide telecommunication networks that included telegraph before the computer systems were prevalent. And so they monopolized and controlled all of the flow of information via telegraph. They also monopolized and controlled communication via the telephone. Oh my gosh, your line dropped. And remember what we discovered with Crypto AG in the fact that they sold compromised hardware into every State Department equivalent around the world in over 100 countries, and then was able to backdoor spy on every cable that was sent to their embassies around the world. So from the time Crypto AG was set up, which was just prior to World War II, until Trump took it down in 2020, over 100 countries had bought this communication gear and had all of their cables being spied on. And at one point, it was out and out owned by the CIA and the B&D, the Germans' version of the CIA. They literally owned this company through a shell company. And Iran, unfortunately, found out that and arrested their salesman, who was completely innocent because he had no idea that the company he worked for was actually owned by the CIA. And he was held in jail for a year. So these people put all of us at risk by doing bullshit stuff like this. Moving on. Evidence seems to point to the fact that the American Security Council was a joint venture between the FBI and corporate America, which is exactly what we have found with Operation Gladio and how the CIA works with corporate America. This is yet just another example of that. According to Fisher, the company's financing the American Security Council did this to meet their Cold War, quote unquote, citizenship responsibility and to basically combat what they were told was communism. Hoover was completely on the side of the American corporations and was as extreme as Harry Young. He ran a massive counterintelligence program known as COINTELPRO. And with it, he infiltrated and disrupted labor unions, civil rights groups, anti-segregationist outfits, and kept tabs on politicians. The early American Security Council had roughly the same aim as COINTELPRO. Membership companies, which grew to about 1,500 corporations in the early 1970s, were able to use the library to screen new and existing employees. Although the American Security Council wouldn't allow any outsiders to view the files, by the early 1970s, it was reported that the American Security Council had information on about 6 million individuals. The information had come from various libraries that had been taken over and was accumulated or compiled together from public sources, mainly newspapers. To what extent private researchers and company executives added information to this database is unknown. It is also not known if the FBI cooperated with the American Security Council in the same way that it had done with its earlier owner, Harry Hung. It also is not known if the applicants have been turned away based on the information. I mean, why else would you be a member if you weren't going to use it? What is known is that in one case, a private investigator used the American Security Council for, quote, security checks about political backgrounds with special interest in any communist type activities, unquote. The name of this private investigator, you guys aren't going to believe this, Guy Bannister, a former FBI agent known to have been the handler of Lee Harvey Oswald of the Kennedy assassination. In this way, it seems that the American Security Council, in combination with private investigators, have been providing a service to the FBI, and this is done for plausible deniability so that they can't get caught doing what we know that they're already actually doing. So I find all of that stuff. And let me just remind you at this point, because the auspices for doing this, if they were ever caught, is to identify, quote, special interest in any communist type activity, unquote. Now, you and I have been sharing this journey together, and we know that people like Lumumba in the Congo was labeled a communist simply because he would not go along with Belgium stealing all of the uranium and selling it as their own to the United States without giving the Congo, who had recently been freed from Belgium, their cut of the profits. He got labeled a communist for bullshit reasons. That's why these types of organizations are a disaster for a free society, because their definition and their labeling is part of the process. They have these organizations so that they can label people and that they can then tar and feather those people with those labels and forever do something that they can't legally do in a court system because there's no evidence to it. And the very first thing you should ask yourself when we find things like this is, how many more are there? The average person may not be worried too much about a group of companies gathering information on communist activities. After all, communism is bad, right? The problem is in defining what a communist is, which I just articulated. The American Security Council was far from the only group that was profiling American citizens based on their political beliefs. The Church League of America, active for decades since 1937, had a database containing millions of names. They added everyone who was, quote, attacking and ridiculing a major doctrine of the Christian faith or the American way of life, unquote. Much of the information came from newspapers and books, but the League explained that it also sat in on communist and leftist meetings and had agents that were ingratiating themselves into these organizations. Now, again, let me just point out the obvious. If you are using Mockingbird Media and their labeling of you trashing the Christian faith in America, your source is bad. You are gathering a database of American citizens based on bullshit reporting. I know I don't have to point that out to you guys, but I'm going to anyway. The controversial detective and private security firm Wackenhut, ran by, well, the original owner was a Christian Scientist, which you can make of that what you want, used the Church League files. Wackenhut also had its own database of suspects in the 1960s and 70s, largely based on anonymous libraries. There must be a lot of these libraries. I didn't even know they existed. From companies that had compiled them and then went out of business. George Wackenhut himself estimated that the library had got up to 3 million names. To what extent these names overlapped these other databases has never been investigated, but it is likely that there were overlap since Wackenhut had worked in national security type environments and was represented on the National Strategy Committee of the American Security Council itself for several decades. In 1968, the list revealed 2 of the 3 co-chairmen of the committee. The list of people on the American Security Council had 2 Wackenhut directors, another frickin' general, Bernhard Schriever, and Lloyd Wright. In addition, Wackenhut Director General Mark Clark, who I've come across in Operation Gladio before as well, was a member. One of Clark's last assignment in the Army was over all forces in Korea. Under Truman, he had been offered the ambassadorship to the Vatican, so you know he's one of them, but was forced to withdraw after protests from various groups. After his retirement, he became the oldest and most experienced director at Wackenhut. At the same time, he was a longtime head of the Citadel Military College in South Carolina. Okay. When Clark resigned from the board at Wackenhut in 1974, his colleague at the American Security Council, General Bernhard Schriever, replaced him. Schriever had been the commander of Air Force Systems Command, which produced the Delta, Triton, and Atlas rockets. Now, Schriever Air Station out in Northern California is actually named after General Schriever. He was a big, big deal. And also, the Air Force Systems Command, which was my first duty assignment between 87 and 89. I worked at their Space Systems Division.
I know you're banding, and I think we lost you.
Can you hear me? Bridget, can you hear me? Bridget, can you hear me? Stellar, can you hear me? I know these guys down here. Okay. So Bridget, hold on. Let me let Bridget know it might be her mic. All right. So let me come back here. I don't know if Liza, I'm going to throw Liza a mic. Stellar, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. So Bridget, you're probably going to have to drop down and I'll bring you back up. Thank you.
Looks like it's me. Sorry, ma'am.
Okay. All right. So, we've got Schriever replacing Clark. And I want you guys to understand how important all of this is because Schriever ran the organization in the Air Force that bought everything. His clout in the Air Force, as far as the military industrial complex, was huge. And because he specifically was an expert in space, which is why Schriever Air Station out in California is named after him. He would have worked on the same Nazi type systems that were done at NASA. As a matter of fact, a lot of the stuff that we developed in the Air Force would be later used by NASA as far as launch vehicles for satellites and all of that kind of thing. So this is a big freaking deal. And it's why this is the most disturbing part of all of this to me, is the integration into these organizations of military people. Military people that are bought and trained with our tax dollars are not supposed to be mobilized against us in these bullshit NGOs that are doing things internationally in our name without our knowledge. So that's why I kind of wanted to go over this stuff with you guys, because of how widespread it is, and how it kind of touches so many different aspects of our life without our even knowing about it. Okay, so the co-chairman of the American Security Council, another one was Lloyd Wright. Lloyd Wright was also a director and National Strategy Committee at Wackenhut. He was an attorney. He had been the committee's initial sole chairman when it was put together back in 1961. A year later, he ran for Senate. He was also Ronald Reagan's campaign manager, which I found very interesting. Wright was known as an extremist. He lost his race when he ran for Senate. And in 1955, his friend, Vice President Richard Nixon, asked him to head a commission on government security. Wright's suggestion to penalize any unauthorized disclosure of classified government information was never implemented, as it would have put tremendous restrictions on freedom of the press. Wright was a major supporter of the John Birch Society, which is another one of these organizations that we run across repeatedly. Remember, John Birch Society was the one that had agreed to finance the Nevada miner that went during our Operation Golden Lily Gold Warrior book review, and then screwed him, took him to court, sued him, made him lose his business, everything, when they tried to kill him. So John Birch Society, not a good thing. The nature of the American Security Council began to change as a result of Castro's takeover of Cuba in 1959. Dictator Batista ran the island from 1933 to 1944, and again since 1952 until the revolution in 1959. U.S. corporations and the American mafia flourished under Batista's rule. When Fidel Castro came to power, he not only kicked out the mafia, but he committed the sin of nationalizing their assets away from American corporations, such as oil refineries, sugar, United Fruit, the GE power companies, and the ITT phone networks had all been in the hands of American interest. He nationalized them all and took them back over for Cuba. Sears Roebuck, the company most prominently invested in American Security Council, was among the victims. In response, Fisher would step up as head of the company's corporate security committee to shift the focus of the American Security Council to from countering domestic subversion to foreign policy. And to do that effectively, he needed access to elected officials in Washington. The first thing Fisher did was open an office in Washington, D.C., and install another FBI agent, retired Lee R. Pennington. He had been retired from the FBI since 1953. He was third in command at that point after Hoover and Tolson. So he was the number 3 guy. Pennington joined the American Legion, where he did similar work as he had done for the FBI. And what was being done at the American Security Council. Gathering information on subversives was basically the way they described it. After retiring from the American Legion, and I mean, he wasn't just like a member of the American Legion. He actually worked for them at their full-time headquarters. Pennington went to work for the American Security Council. His office produced the Washington Report, a bi-weekly and some years weekly newspaper that was spread to all of the members. They also did ads or articles for local papers, and many of which were entered into congressional records. Years later, it came out that Pennington was also a CIA asset who had been doing CIA work on Capitol Hill. He was close to James McCord, the former CIA officer who was in charge of the Watergate burglary. And he was also involved in destroying files linking McCord to the CIA. Pennington, weirdly enough, died of a heart attack a few months after the disclosure that he was a CIA asset. So anybody that thinks they don't kill their own is not in the know. Working under Pennington at the American Security Council was retired Admiral Chester Ward. He was the editor of the Washington Report newsletter. Not long after joining the American Security Council, he became one of the nation's most intense fearmongers, together with co-author Phyllis Schlafly. Now, this lady we've actually came across a few times, and you spell her last name Schlafly. In 1964, the duo published the book Gravediggers, in which they attacked the New York banking establishment, claiming that it was undermining elections and was exposing the country to danger by undermining election. Oh, excuse me. Hold on. I got sidetracked. And was exposing the country to danger by reducing defense spending. Yeah, they're not actually attacking them. They're trying to drum up defense spending, so they kind of like just put them out like barking dogs. 2 years later, they write Strike from Space, a mega-death mystery was published, warning for the possibility of an unexpected nuclear strike from the Soviets. Like I said, fear-mongering. In 1974, they published Kissinger on a Couch, criticizing Kissinger's policy of détente and claiming that he was an instrument of the Soviets. And most of this was instigated by Kissinger. This is all an orchestrated, it's not like they're attacking them. After setting up the Washington office, the next step for Fisher was to put together a national strategy committee filled with prestigious military and intelligence officers as well as sponsors. Every single one of them could be found at the ultra right of the political spectrum. And I'm going to change that because it's not technically the ultra right. It's actually the fascist element of everybody. Because this is a worldwide effort. We're just talking about the part that happened in the United States. In addition to reorganizations at the American Security Council, members were also involved in setting up Citizens Committee for a Free Cuba in 1963. The American Security Council board members, as Edward Teller and Claire Booth Luce, were also directors. Now you have to stop here too. Who is Claire Booth Luce? Remember, she's the one that ends up at the Italian embassy right after World War II. She's instrumental in throwing the 1948 election. She helped spend that $5 million to buy that election to get Italy into NATO. You see how these guys are all the same? This is an apparatus of Operation Gladio. Another board member is a guy by the name of, I don't even know how to say this name, Sprulili Braden. His first name is spelled Sprulili. Ruille, and the last name is Braden. He eventually goes on to be chairman. When John Fisher joined the board in 1964, there was a Leo Charney, Chrene, and he was William Casey, future CIA director's mentor. Oh, Admiral Arleigh Burke and Nicholas Duke Biddle, Biddle, both members of the elite Pilgrim Society. That's another one we have to go over because it's crazy too. Sat on the board. Executive Director Paul Bethel would be counted among the Kennedy assassination suspects, was also the executive director here. And CIA man, let's see. Oh, Paul Bethel was also a CIA asset and worked closely with David Atlee Phillips, who is also a CIA guy, on the anti-Castro Cuban underground. So carrying out worldwide terrorist attacks, not just against Castro Cuba, but also down in Latin America and over in Angola and other places. So you have quite the array of people intermixed with the CIA and the State Department, like Claire Booth Luce ends up being an ambassador. And you can see, and I do want to make this point too, because this is very illuminating for how this stuff works. You remember several sessions ago, I talked to you guys about how in the old-fashioned days, like in the late 1800s and early 1900s, they had all of these fashionable dinner clubs among the London elite and in New York City. And these people would be members. Not everybody was on every dinner club, but they had about a 25% overlap with all of the different dinner clubs. So you didn't have to go to every single dinner club during the month in order to know what was being talked about and the spy network in all of the dinner clubs because of the overlap. And that's exactly how these NGOs work. These NGOs are the modern day version of the antiquated 150-year-old dinner clubs. That's what they are. And the board makeup of these NGOs, these councils and all of this other stuff, so they have meetings once a quarter, once a month. And if 25% of Council A is represented in Council B, and then 25% of that goes on to C, you can see by the time you get back around to A's meeting, the guys that have kind of ferreted their way through all of these other iterations have picked up all of the information. And it's literally like coordinating efforts for all of the above attack on whatever thing that they're wanting to attack. And that's how they coordinate with each other, is these overlapping board memberships of these non-governmental organizations. And I'm going to do just a little bit more of this particular one because it goes into the whole scare tactics that I think is important. And then we'll open it up. Throughout the Cold War, the conservatives of the American Security Council and other groups were struggling against the Kennedy's limited test ban treaty. Kissinger's proposal of detente and the strategic arms reduction talks. So those limitations, they didn't like at all. Behind all of these rational policies that everybody seemed to collectively agree upon were these military industrial complex war hawks. And they saw things differently. All these diplomatic efforts were basically normalizing relationships with the Soviets, which then would defeat their ability to use it as a boogeyman. So they opposed any effort to be diplomatic at all with anything. And they didn't even want you talking to them. And we've seen what happened to leaders that talked to them, simply talked to them. They were assassinated. So if it had been up to these guys, the United States would have used nuclear weapons in a multitude of occasions. And keep in mind, that's exactly what happened in 1967 with the attempted sinking of the USS Liberty. They wanted that to be an all-out nuclear war. They repeatedly tried to do this. In 1950, after his own forces were overran by Chinese troops due to their own mistakes, General MacArthur pushed for the use of a nuclear weapon in Korea against China. His exact words, this is a quote, "I would have dropped 30 or so atomic bombs strung across the neck of Manchuria. Then I would have introduced 500,000 Chinese nationalist troops, i.e. Chiang Kai-shek drug guys from Taiwan, and then spread behind us from the Sea of Japan to the Yellow Sea, basically a 5-mile stretch, a belt of radioactive cobalt. It has an active life of about 60 to 100 years and contaminates everything. For at least 60 years, there would have been no land invasion of Korea from the north. I am certain that the Russians would have done nothing about this strategy. My plan was a cinch," unquote. Of course, not everyone agreed with him. State Department files reportedly stated that the U.S. was only in the possession of 20 nukes at the time. So where the hell he's getting 30, no one knows. And it turns out to be impossible to find enough concentration of Chinese troops to use nuclear weapons against. The State Department also advised against using the Taiwanese as they were not strong enough to defend against a Chinese invasion of their own island. If the U.S. would have intervened in the conflict at that point, it might well have been able to bring Russia in as well. And then, of course, that would have dictated the use of a nuclear weapon. And that's what they're all about. President Truman, who ultimately fired MacArthur for insubordination, was of the opinion that MacArthur was hoping for an all-out war. The two eventually parted ways with MacArthur calling Truman a little bastard who believes he is a patriot, while Truman referred to the general as a dumb son of a bitch and wasn't right in the head. Sorry, those are just quotes. What is absolutely true is that men surrounding MacArthur were very much interested in the idea of a war to prevent a war. It was in August 1949, just before the Korean conflict heated up, that the Soviet Union conducted its first nuclear bomb test. And keep in mind, it's just trying to keep up with the United States because we're already done. And we've already killed people with one. It took 2 years before another test took place in October 1951, was the first airdrop of one, a test. At this point, the Soviet Union was still far behind the capabilities of the United States. It was in this period, in the early days of the Cold War, that some military officers flirted with the idea of attacking the Soviet Union in a quote-unquote preventive fashion. The strategy designed under Project Control in the early 1950s at the U.S. Air War College, which is where I graduated from, was, I guess they did a thing called Project Control, which was this war simulation. It gave the Soviet Union 6 months to capitulate under terms outlined by the Americans. If the Soviet Union refused, the U.S. would strike it with nuclear weapons. This study was strongly tied to the future American Security Council members. Its head was Colonel Raymond Sleeper, an American Security Council National Strategic Committee member. Among the supporters were General Curtis LeMay. He was Strategic Air Command, which is where all of our nuclear weapons are kept. Thomas S. Power, Air Force General Nathan Twining, and Admiral Arthur Radford. Another supporter was General George Keegan, whose activities were closely intertwined with the American Security Council. So you get the idea that the American Security Council may be a little misnamed since they're not interested in our security at all. LeMay, always eager to start a new war, which he definitely was, had actually begun to implement aspects of Project Control on his own. Central to Project Control were overflights by LeMay's spy planes to police Soviet airspace. Even before the plan was shown to politicians, LeMay had ordered a test run of a converted B-47 bomber, which took off from Rayford, which is in England. It flew around the coast of Norway. There it suddenly turned south and flew deep into the Soviet Union, photographing airfields and military installations. The Soviets were furious. Quote, the pilot of this provocative mission, Colonel Hal Austin, had been personally briefed by the general. LeMay said, well, maybe if we do this overflight right, we can get the World War III started. If Austin thought LeMay's remarks might be a joke, an encounter between the two men 30 years later showed that it was not. His, meaning LeMay's, comment there again was, well, we'd have been a hell of a lot better off if we'd have got World War III started in those days. So in other words, he wasn't joking. By late 1954, Project Control had received a major political knockback when the State Department rejected it. Then another blow. The Air War College war game the idea for many months into 1955, and a letter from LeMay tells of the results. The Red Team, acting as the USSR, launched a preventative nuclear strike on the Blue Team, acting as the US. The Blue overflights of Red territory triggered off the conflict. Despite this, in 1956, LeMay undertook a major series of spy flights over the Soviet Union. In April alone, there were a set of 9 penetrations of Soviet Union's northern borders. There are believed to have been as many of these flights that year, though no record of President Eisenhower's has been found to confirm that. As the person who ran World War II firebombings in Japanese cities, killing more than 2 million people in the process, LeMay had grown to become completely indifferent to innocent people being killed. During his tenure as the Chief of Staff of the Air Force, Curtis LeMay was a major headache to Kennedy and much of his administration officials. He pushed for massive bombing campaigns against North Vietnam, while Kennedy had no interest in expanding the war. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, Curtis LeMay wanted to hear nothing of a naval blockade. Instead, he insisted on being allowed to bomb the Cuban missile sites, not knowing or even caring that Cuba had already received about 100 nuclear weapons and that local field commanders had been given the authority to launch them against any U.S. military attack. Most people regard the outcome of the Cuban Missile Crisis as extremely fortunate, but not LeMay, who said it was the greatest defeat in our history. Much of the CIA was of the same opinion. Bill Harvey, the station chief in Miami, was even banished to Rome by Kennedy for sending unauthorized commando teams into Cuba during the crisis. LeMay, his protege, Power, and Joint Chief Chairman, General Lyman Lemitsker, who is one of my all-time favorite creepy ass jerkwads, because he's the guy that authored Operation Northwood and the one that was NATO commander when they sent teams from NATO to assassinate JFK. So, this is saying that Lyman Lemitsker was one of LeMay's proteges, which explains everything. They were also supporters of the single integrated operational plan called PSYOP, which called for a massive retaliation with the entire U.S. nuclear weapon arsenal on Russia, China, and Soviet allied states, even when only the Soviet Union would attack the U.S. Kennedy resented the plan, and McNamara ordered that it be revised in 1962 to basically just be a state-for-state attack. There were other persons at the American Security Council who had learned to stop worrying and love the bomb. Sam Cohen was the designer of the neutron bomb and advocated its use in Vietnam. Edward Teller was the father of the hydrogen bomb and a major proponent of its use in 1980. The idea behind the laser, X-ray lasers, to blow up nuclear bombs in space, the energy of which would then be used to power lasers that were to shoot down nuclear missiles before reaching their intended targets. The project never reached developmental stage. In 1991, General John Singleb of the American Security Council, because he had to have been there. He's in everything. Operation Golden Lily, Vietnam, that guy's everywhere. Setting up banks with Paul Helliwell. It was John Singleb who suggested to use nuclear weapons against Saddam Hussein in the first Gulf War. During Gulf War II, speculation arose of developing a new generation of tactical nuclear weapons. Considering the neocons are fully backed by the American Security Council, you can be assured that came up for discussion. So we're going to stop there. I do have a few other points that I want to make that happened with this organization throughout the 1970s because they're very relevant to what we've been talking about. But today we're going to stop there. I just find this fascinating. I don't know about you guys, because to me, this explains the motivation behind a lot of what we're seeing. And it explains to you how these people think. And I think that's fascinating because what I hear so often when you have conversations with people about this is, and I understand the naivety, it's no one could actually do that. No one ever thinks that way. They can't be that evil. I want you guys to understand they're that freaking evil. Go ahead, Bridget.
Earlier today, cousin It and I were talking, and she brought up something that, boy, it just hit with both hands. And it was, we were discussing this, and I've been searching through my brain on parallels with Gladio and the assassination attempt on Trump. And just like you've been pointing out through all these, it's all of these businesses and all of these industries that are so infiltrated and manipulated and used in every different Gladio, and we come across them over and over and over again. But one of the things that you were just mentioning, and that is that they want war. And how do they normally accomplish that? Just like with 9/11, they used a massive fear-based event to create a war. And God forbid that bullet have struck home with Donald Trump, it would have been the easiest way to get the entire or the bulk of the United States people, and if they started saying it was Iran, it would be the easiest reason to get everybody behind going to Iran and bombing the crap out of them and starting another war. Just like they have done so many times before. It's just, once you have those Gladio glasses on, it's like it is so clear that everything they're doing,
right. So unequivocally, whoever they tell you was behind it absolutely is not behind it. That doesn't mean we know who was behind it. I can 100% guarantee you whoever the FBI says did it did not do it.
Exactly. And that was
So
in fact, they're
hold on just a minute.
They're telegraphing their plan.
Bridget, while you're talking, anybody else that wants a mic now? We're off the actual formal presentation. And so please just request the mic and we'll get you up here to ask your questions. We're just saving this to the end because it's less aggravating for me having that thing pop up all the time on my phone. Jeff, go ahead. Or excuse me, Bridget, I'm sorry. Were you finished? And then we'll go to Jeff.
Yes, ma'am. Like I said, sometimes it's a delayed reaction thing with the Gladio glasses. And I kept on looking, and when she started pointing out that the FBI was saying it was an Iran, he had encrypted accounts over in Iran, it just hit home. And I'm like, they were trying to start a war with Iran.
Well, so what I had said earlier as well is that my husband was watching on television on one of the business channels, and they were explaining how you have to use the FBI in these overseas areas in order to access overseas encrypted accounts. And I looked at my husband and I'm like, oh, isn't that convenient? You mean the same FBI that would be used to set up those overseas encrypted accounts would be the ones that are going to negotiate with those foreign governments to get access to the encrypted accounts? That's really, really convenient. So that's exactly right. So you're going to have access to having set up those accounts as the FBI people over there, and you can make them say whatever you want them to say. And then you're going to say, oh my God, I found these. And look, oh my God, I got access to them. Oh, pat myself on the back as the FBI for having access to these accounts, when in fact, they're the most likely person to have set them up.
And that's what she was saying. She said, I highly doubt that they were actually ever existed prior to this month.
Correct.
Because they've done it every single time exactly the same way.
Yeah.
Prior to the kid getting whacked.
Right.
I don't even think that,
Well,
so
likely.
I apologize. I've been driving, but I get to harass y'all now.
Okay. Well, likely they would have set them up during the planning phase of this because they have this well mapped out, right? On how they're going to drip the information out, the timing at which the information is going to be exposed. So yeah, it is likely that they would have been set up prior to, but not significantly long. Hell, for all that matters, they probably have 3 or 4 in every country to be able to use on demand. God knows when they were set up.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Jeff, go ahead.
Good morning, Colonel. Good morning, Stellar, Bridget, and Cousin, and everybody that's on the podcast. Bridget just brought about a seriously good point about the Iran being involved in the assassination of Trump. That is a classic Joseph Goebbels. Always accuse the other side of what you're guilty of. And to Colonel's point, that the faster you hear the information coming from these people, the more that you know that it is a lie, because there's not a detailed inspection of the actual event. So the faster they come out with the answer, the more that you know it's false. I think that the black syndicate is falling in real time right now, Colonel. Some of the most sickest, demented people that have ever lived on the planet. And I mean, back to the Roman Empire, the gladiator days of throwing live humans to lions in the Colosseum, doesn't compare to what they're doing right now. I'm in full agreement with you on that, Colonel. And I just see it at a head right now, and that they're just not going to stop until they're completely and totally defeated. And I think that's the direction we need to head, is to defeat of these people.
I agree.
Agreed. And it gets just going back to what, I mean, President was just on a roll this morning. I have to brag on her for a minute, because it was like all of a sudden it just became crystal clear, because they always use, just like the Colonel has always repeatedly pointed out, they use playbook. It literally is like a football playbook. And they're going to go flip over here and we're going to use this plan. They're not particular. I guess it's the only way they can keep control of these very elaborate networks, where they already have these set up, already have these internet things. This is how we're going to run the narrative. And when they can find the DNA on this guy, but can't get into the FBI cannot, quote, get into his phone, but they can get DNA evidence on him within 24 hours of who he was. Yeah, that's telling, because that says they already had this all set up.
Yeah. Well, and you can hear the narrative come out tomorrow that with the assassination of the Iranian president, that was retribution, when in fact it was the CIA on both ends.
Right.
Yeah. So they're not very imaginative. And at this point, I think we're well versed in looking at enough of this information to be able to at least see in real time some of what they're doing. But I did want to, since we don't have too many questions, I did want to spend a minute and show you guys just how digging in these rabbit holes led me to find this American Security Council. So if you go to, last night I was writing an article and I needed to know the date of the World Anti-Communist League's creation. And so I looked it up and saw that there was a precursor organization to the World Anti-Communist League called the World League for Freedom and Democracy, which is laughable. And that actually was set up in excuse me, I got them backwards. The American Anti-Communist League was set up in 1952, and then it became the World League for Freedom and Democracy. That's why they keep saying they want to save their democracy. That's the democracy they want to save, not the one that is the basis for our republic. So I was looking for the date. Anyway, I am looking down through here just to get a couple of other spellings of people's names that were involved in it, like make sure Chiang Kai-shek's name was spelled correctly. And I noticed, retired General Charles Willoughby was involved in helping move, with Paul Helliwell, by the way, Chiang Kai-shek over to Taiwan in 1949. And then they set up right after that the World Anti-Communist League. That's really weird. And then it goes on and talks about how, it worked during the Cold War and blah, blah, blah. And then it said in 1990 that it changed its name. And I'm like, oh, shit. 1990, not 1991 when the Soviet Union collapsed, but 1990, like they knew that the Soviet Union was going to collapse and they needed a different name because it wasn't going to be World Anti-Communist League anymore. I'm like, what the hell? So now I've got my attention here and not on my article, which, by the way, I didn't finish writing yet. And I started going down here because I spent all night reading about that other shit. And I'm like, looking at the rest of this stuff and the names involved, and I'm like, oh my gosh, look at this. The freedom and democracy train descended among the Asian people via the Anti-Communist League, Chiang Kai-shek of Taiwan, Aquarino of the Philippines, and Rhee of Korea. All three of them got together, and they're the ones that are starting in Asia this anti-communist league that has to do with Operation Gladio. Oh, and look, the other participating states: South Vietnam, Thailand, Okinawa, Japan, Hong Kong, and Macau. And Macau's like the biggest. I mean, it was like Cuba before Castro took over. It's like mafia city. And Hong Kong, of course, we know was money laundering capital for drugs. And I'm like, well, crap, that's the entire gang right there in Asia for the drug networks. And then it talks about a whole bunch of other stuff as you get down here. And then I don't know if you guys have used this very often, but you get down to the end and it has some information about the membership of it and stuff. You get down to the bottom and it says other organizations involved, American Security Council. It was the number one listed on there. In La Circle, which I've done an expose on as well, because that was Bernard, the WWF, and all of those guys is involved in it. And I'm like, well, crap, let me look at this American Security Council because I recognize the rest of them. I hadn't looked at that one. And I'm like, son of a bitch. And oh, by the way, controversial participants of the of the World Anti-Communist League. Look at number, I don't know, 10 or 12. Otto Skorzeny. Is that freaking crazy? And then there's a bunch of Nazis, Reverend Moon, and we know the Moonies were down in South America guarding the poppy fields. And so again, once you understand how this thing operates, and now you're going to love this part. World Anti-League, Communist League held annual conferences at various locations around the world. Numerous groups participated, including Unification Church of Reverend Moon. The World Anti-Communist League also enjoyed support from many congressmen, most notably Senator John McCain.
Oh my.
I'm like,
but just all the usual suspects.
He sat on the U.S. Council for World Freedom Board of Directors in the 80s. When his membership was brought up during the election, he said he resigned from the council in 1984 and asked in 1986 to have his name removed from the letterhead. Yeah, so there you go.
Of course he did.
So John McCain's tied through the World Anti-Communist League directly to Operation Gladio. And that was like 10 minutes last night.
That's crazy. It just shows you, again, we talk about this.
You really can't make this stuff up, can you? Sorry.
You cannot make this stuff up.
Right? Exactly, Stella. And boy, the stuff that's going on in the news, other than, in the financial news, and I am not a financial whiz and I don't understand most of it, but I do understand, or I can see the dismantling now that you've been pointing out. And it is, I think in that respect, I think Jeff is right. I think we're seeing it now. We've been seeing like hints of it here, there, and other. We've been seeing some practice runs with this, that, and the other thing. But I think we're now actually seeing it. I think whatever operation, whatever things are going on in the background appear to be in full swing, no longer attempting to hide or even covert. Because as much of it is hitting the news, suicide, sudden, spontaneous cyber attacks, things crashing. There was a big Microsoft thing that crashed. President was talking about.
Yeah, that's CrowdStrike. They loaded a update and it crashed a whole bunch of people's computer systems, and they had to try to walk it back. Obviously putting CrowdStrike back in the news right after the assassination attempt is very interesting, seeing as how CrowdStrike's tied directly to Seth Rich's assassination as well. So go ahead, Stellar.
Yeah, I found that one to be very interesting, and I was messaging, I think, hasn't it, or Bridget, about what's going on here in Vegas. Airport is really jacked up. Took my mom to the bank. ATMs aren't working, but if you go inside, it does. So either bank runs are happening or not. Yesterday, they had in England, the Bank of England, they were changing their offboarding and wiring stuff. So there's a lot of stuff going on. But crowdsource is very interesting because that, like you said, Seth Rich, doesn't that have ties with Julian Assange, the assassination attempt on Donald Trump, and then those different ties as well. So there's a lot of things really happening right now. But if you guys are flying anywhere, reschedule your flights because you're not going to be going anywhere for a couple of days, I don't think.
It's amazing. It's, how, when has that ever happened before? There's just, we are living in truly the most interesting time in history. And equipped with our glasses, Gladio glasses, I am just sometimes in awe. And at how amazing God is in facilitating and orchestrating and allowing a lot of the good things that are happening.
I definitely agree with that assessment. SR71, go.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Colonel, and thank you all for joining us here today. Given what I've looked up concerning CrowdStrike and what's going on at this point, I can almost say, in my mind, that this is actually planned. If you take a look at what's really going on, myself having worked in the IT industry since 1976, I've seen all the changes, been through it all. I can tell you right now, nobody worth their salt doesn't have a backup plan. So to say I can't get this taken care of in short order is absolutely bonkers. Next on the list, when you consider what's happening, is it's funny that all of this is tied to Microsoft 365 products, which was done before as well, one time. On top of that, what we find out is it has no effect whatsoever on Macs, on Linux systems, on any other systems. It's simply Microsoft. So something tells me all of this has been planned. Other than that, I got nothing else, Colonel.
So let me just tell you my limited, and I am absolutely not an IT expert, but this is what I know as a commander. I was responsible for a computer data system for personnel. And when the updates, and you cannot have a personnel system go down industry-wide, you just can't. Promotions, pay, everything, health is based on this system. So anytime that you load a release or an update, you do your backup, you have tested it for weeks, you load the release, and if it breaks shit, you immediately erase everything and reload your backup. It's like 15 minutes. So whatever happened is something completely different than what they are actually telling us, because these types of major systems don't not have a reverse switch to reset. I know that from being a commander. So that is unequivocally true, SR71. So thank you for bringing that up. Jeff, go ahead.
Colonel, you were speaking on the French connection, the force connection for the heroin that was brought into the United States. I believe you were right about the Italian mafia through Carmen Galante, who was executed. He was with the Italians and the CIA with Lucky Luciano, which probably played a key role in helping to bring the drugs and the heroin to the United States. Chiang Kai-shek and others. I was interested in knowing if the East India Company, who in 1970 trafficked more opium monetarily wise than GM and Ford combined their total gross profit, more opium, heroin products on East India through the British company. Do you believe that the British were in cahoots with the Italians and the Central Intelligence Agency as well?
Well, you're talking two different time frames. I mean, the British East Indies was done and utilized as a drug trade route during the time of the Boxer Wars, the Boxer Rebellions, back when they were taking Indian opium and moving it into China and using it as a way to, it's almost like a spearhead military operation where they were moving ahead of
wars. To fund wars, like you said.
Well, no, what I'm saying is that the funding of the war thing came later. The trade of opium with the West Indies was for colonial purposes. It was just another way to placate, like when they wanted to go into China, they brought in and grew. They found local people that were treasonous bastards, convinced them, like Chiang Kai-shek and his predecessor in the KMT armies, that says, hey, we're going to drug all your neighbors and so we can have our way with them. That's kind of what they did. That was a whole use of opium as kind of a softening of a country. And that's what pissed Mao off. He saw what they were doing, that they were bringing opium in, drugging local populations. So basically they can rape and murder and steal from them. And, you know, everybody's high, and like San Francisco and LA, they're just laying around on the ground. Nobody gives a shit. So you corrupt the culture in order for you to go in and dominate and take over people so you can rule the world. So the East Indies company, and the West Indies for that matter, in both the Dutch Empire, the British Empire, because the British certainly was not alone, that was their whole way of doing business. And they are the precursors to the CIA. They did all of that stuff in the late 1800s, early 1900s, outside of government. They were basically a company that was set up that supposedly when they wanted them to be independent of the government, they were, and when they didn't want them to be, they weren't. But we all know that they worked for the government. And as such, they were a mechanism to do illegal shit, but people could still go to jail for it. By taking the East Indies prototype and embedding it in government, like in MI6 or the CIA, they took away the risk of you ever going to jail doing the same damn thing. They go in, they overthrow governments, they ply them with drugs and however else they can corrupt their culture. They have all kinds of new ways of doing that with MK Ultra. And then they exploit the country. So it's the same concept, you just have the timeline wrong. The East Indies Company, West Indies Company, those all came first. That created a prototype. The World War II gave them the impetus to put those entities inside of government for protection of the criminals. And they're basically doing the same thing under the government auspices now, as opposed to it being a separate entity.
Colonel, that reminds me of a movie line where the guy is banging on the American rocket to get off of the asteroid. He says, Russian space station, American space station, all parts made in China. And he hits it and it cranks up. He said, let's go. And it reminds me of you saying that everything, all of this is connected. Gladio, Mystic Ultra, the Black Syndicate, everything is connected. That's where I was trying to look at. These are the same players. They're Black Syndicate too. And that's right on point. Thank you for the time frame.
Sure.
Mistake.
Sure. Frogger, what do you got coming up?
He better be opening a space soon.
I know, he's at work, so
There's so much to talk about.
He's at work.
Yeah,
Are you
having a
talking
little
to
bit
me?
of frog withdrawal.
I'm talking to
talking to
you,
me?
Frog.
Yeah, of course we're talking to you. I told him to give you a mic just so I could pick on you.
Yeah, Star just messaged me and goes, they want to pick on you. Okay, go right ahead.
Well, we want to know what you got coming up.
Yeah,
When's your
it's
next
really no
space?
fun when you're not here.
What I got coming up is I guess I just want to let people continue to, well, I got you coming up.
I know. Are you going to have a
maybe-
space this weekend?
Yeah, I probably will. I'm not sure if I might do a space on all the unusual activity around what's happening with the cell phones being tracked to the FBI person. I'm not convinced that lady in that picture is who they think she is because of the lips. And I think it hurts us when people are going too far down the rabbit hole. But I think I may do a space on verifiable information, like the white van that they found where the guy said they were towing away a van that was off property, about the SUV that was tied to the Department of Agriculture, and the cell phone tied to the FBI person. I might, do a space on that. I think that would be fun. I think facts matter, or at least what you can prove.
I agree.
So, I don't know.
We're
We've been
going to,
talking about a roundtable too, right?
yeah, we're going to try to do that
Yeah.
next Friday. I'm
I'm down.
working on that.
And I mean, I'm just watching people's reactions to, the pick and all of that stuff. People are going to feel the way they feel, right? But it's very interesting. That may be part of the space, just people's feelings on what's going on. Because the truth is, we have no control. And things aren't what they seem. Hey, don't.
Hey, oh,
Go ahead, Stella.
absolutely.
Go ahead, Stellar.
Hi. Yeah. Also, we were also talking, like the things that could be substantiated. It sounds like there's now confirmation that there was another shooter, and stuff like that. Just the fishy stuff that was going on. The lady, whoever she was probably someone, but who knows? People can make their lips look bigger or smaller. So I don't go by that kind of stuff, but she was definitely, because there's things called injections. And if she was on the tail end of it, she wasn't wearing makeup. You can put makeup on. I mean, I have that lady, but also another big thing, if you want to do conspiracy things, like the stuff, CrowdStrike or whatever it's called, crowdsource, whatever they're called.
CrowdStrike.
That group, CrowdStrike, it has the ties to Seth Rich, more than likely, Julian Assange, of course. And I find it very convenient about what's going on now. And, McAfee also stated that, he put those computers, and it seemed like that, and he gave laptops to, a past administration. And that was supposedly like his little kill switch, like, that kind of stuff. It just seems like a lot of this stuff seems to be, looping around that previous administration, if that makes any sense. And maybe I'm sounding like a lunatic, but, and with what's going on with the monetary systems throughout the world, there's just a lot of stuff, it seems like, going on, in my opinion. So it'd be kind of nice having a talk about that kind of stuff as well.
Right. So other people can hear people talk it out and know what's fact and what's fiction. I agree. SR71, go ahead.
Just to add a little more context to what's going on here, Colonel, with these servers, which is what they are. They are servers. They're hosts. In other words, you query them for whatever you need, and they come back with answers for you. The whole deal with the servers is, if you take a look at what's happened in the U.S., servers are no longer part of a company's organization. They are outsourced. They belong to Azure. They belong to Microsoft. They belong to Google. They belong to guess who. So now you can understand, I think, more clearly why we're not seeing these companies backing stuff out, because it has to come from the platform and where they're stored.
So speaking of that, I don't know if you guys dug down into the weeds on the whole, what happened after Robert Maxwell died and his twin daughters and them going into the software business, and how they were selling backdoor modifications to Microsoft. I think that's all very interesting in light of all of this stuff happening. So they had created a whole bunch of different add-ons to Microsoft 360 software and as a utility. And that capability, because they are tied to the IDF and Israel's Mossad, and they had people working for them in their software, Silicon Valley appalachia, that had those ties. There was lots of implication made that what they were selling, because there wasn't anything special about it as far as it being compared to peer software, but they seem to have had an in run into Microsoft and the 360 platform, and that no matter what it was that they did was bought by that entity. So I think that's very interesting. That's something that had came out in some work that the first part of that I learned reading several of Whitney Webb's articles about it, but then there were some other people's investigations that went into more detail about what the utility was that they had developed as far as the software add-on, and basically was comparing it to its peers. There was nothing about it that was special. It was more expensive and therefore would have been least likely to get it, but it was the one that was always bought. So I just found that interesting. Jeff, what you got? Nothing? Cousin It, Bridget?
I'm sorry, Colonel. I just had a phone call come in. You hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I did have a question that was pertaining to President-elect Trump. In your opinion, is President Trump experienced enough to be the president of the United States? And my second question
How is that a question? Of course he is. He's already done it. Go ahead. What's your question about General Flynn?
Why do you think General Flynn was not chosen to be vice president?
I don't know. I'm not going to second guess Trump. And of course, Trump is qualified to be president. He's already been president and he was a damn good one. So, yeah.
Okay. That was my opinion too as well. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
So then it seems that J.D. Vance was put in play to help swing the Ohio and the Midwest states to vote for President Trump. And he is, well, from what I've been told and from what I've seen, a pretty loyal and honest guy, even though he voted for Hillary Clinton. Everybody makes mistakes. We all make mistakes. What's your opinion of Vance?
I don't think Trump doesn't need any help in the Midwest. I don't think that's why he was picked at all. I think there's a common theme that is being portrayed here, that we're a big tent and people who have passed can be welcomed in and play vital roles in the big tent. That is the reason why the people were chosen to speak at the convention. He is trying to hand out olive leaves to people that he genuinely believes and wants to model as people who didn't. Trump's whole appeal now, you have an entire, let's just say 50% of his current voting bloc that has been with him the entire time, from the very first day until the end of the yesterday. Then you have 25% that came along during his first presidency. And you have another 25% of everybody that's with him as of yesterday that came along in the time that he's been out of office. And I think appealing to that broad brush of all of those pots of people is where he's at today. And what he wants to do is he wants the rest of America to see the people that were the never Trumpers in prominent positions that are now on board and articulating all of his positive attributes to get the rest that can be gotten. Some were lost forever, but the rest that can be gotten both prior to and in the immediate aftermath of the election. Because when he gets elected in November, people are going to try to do some shit. And we need to make sure, i.e. Operation Gladio, we need to make sure that there is as many people inside the tent as possible in that aftermath, because what would have happened in 2020 via the Civil War cannot happen in 2024 if the majority of the people are in the tent. Go ahead, Cousin It.
Yeah, that actually, just to refer back to the conversation we had yesterday, like why would that like hooker looking thing that's pro-abortion be speaking at the national convention? Because initially I was very offended by that. I thought that was disgusting, and everybody screaming, "Oh, she's a Satanist," and blah 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 blah. But like the Colonel just said, if she's standing up there, we can talk to these people 6 ways to Sunday until we turn blue in the face. That woman standing up, we're repulsed by it, but she has millions of people that actually follow her. And those are the people that Trump is trying to talk to. And the only way he's going to get them to listen is to have the hooker stand up. I didn't like it. I was offended by it. But, talking it through yesterday with Bridget and the Colonel, it makes sense. So, and I'm far from a Puritan, right? I just think she's disgusting. That's my own personal opinion.
But who did God use? He used the hookers.
Exactly.
That is true. That's a very good point. Thank you. Good reminder.
Yeah. He used sinners to show people that he was an open tent kind of guy. And to me, Trump is paralleling that exact same mentor type relationship. And for those who have the bravery to stand on that stage and admit that they were wrong, admit that Trump is doing a good job, which does take a lot of shit. That's not an easy thing to do. And kind of hat in hand go, I effed up. I was wrong. He is a good guy, and I'm going to vote for him. With 100 million followers. You and I can't do that, as Cousin It just said. They're not going to listen to us. I can reach some of my kids' friends. I can't reach 100 million people. And so if you can convince someone that has a followership of 100 million people that you're a good guy, I'm damn sure going to put them on the stage. And I don't care. We don't have a purity test to be have a good country. Because we're all sinners, and all sin is the same. So we're all equal, and we need to get over ourselves. That's just like the bottom line. Go ahead, Bridget.
I think Froggy was up before me.
Okay, Frog, go.
I like what you said. I would also add, because he's young, he definitely will bring a lot more people. I don't know why age matters, but he'll definitely bring a lot more people to the yard, like I said before. And I'm, have my own questions, but I'm not questioning Trump. He can pick whoever the hell he wants. He's not Mike Pence, I'll say that. He's not tied to Paul Ryan. He wasn't told he had to take this choice. So anyone says, "Oh, it's another Pence," they're not looking at it probably naturally. But it's either him or Vivek, and people were more turned off by Vivek, and there's more dirt on Vivek Swampy than there is a guy who's currently a senator. And since he can be replaced and they get to pick their own, that may be a better option. But I thought what you said, Colonel, was pretty spot on. I don't know why General Flynn wasn't picked. I want him picked myself, but I think it's because he has a a different role in play, and you got to assuage people that are tarnished by what the deep state did to him during his time. You gotta walk him in as an appointment and not as the VP pick. You can't give the media another target. That's just my 2 cents.
I think those are good points. Andy, go ahead.
It's just, Colonel, I just wanted to also on your point, I think there's at least 2 camps of people, on, you might say, the other side. Those who are, benefiting and in there and into this nefarious stuff, and those who have been psyoped. So they've been, convinced one way or another, and they've just been, pushing that agenda without really understanding why. So I think that's really, important point you brought up, that, you can't just, take these people aside and just never give them another chance. If they wake up and they realize, things were not as they seemed. And yeah, I think that was a really good point. So yeah, just the people who are into it, who are, are benefiting from this dark stuff, those are the ones who probably won't see turning or being accepted into the fold. But
Yeah.
anyways, that's my comment.
Yeah. Thank you, Andy. Bridget, go ahead.
Yeah, that was my point, or one of the things I wanted to add on to, what you're all saying, is if you listen to, one of the biggest things that was, if you got past the shock of what is she doing on stage, one of the neatest things was that she said specifically, I did my research and I found out blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And when that happens, she's encouraging, again, people that we can't reach to actually not accept what the mainstream media is saying.
Right.
And talk about breaking out of the matrix and uniting. And again, the other part was, and if anybody didn't get a chance to listen to Trump's speech last night, I would encourage him to, because there was, he, after the assassination attempt, supposedly he ripped up his old speech and wrote a new one. In the beginning there were 2 things, well, actually, there was about a dozen things that stood out to me, but he mentioned and gave the glory to God, I'm going to guess 30 times during that speech.
Yeah.
I have never heard any of his speeches where he focused so much on not just uniting the people, but uniting the people under God, giving God the glory for saving him, and also bringing out a totally new Trump that is going to appeal, because one of the things that the other side has always complained about was the rhetoric, the aggressiveness. And he was not constantly talking about being the president, not just for the right, not just for the left, but for everyone. And being united and uniting the country. It was a much different speech. And he also gave a few, in my opinion, hints as to what happened that day and hints about what is coming. But anyway, that's just my 2 cents worth.
Okay. Cousin It, I noticed you had your hand up and then it went down. Did you need to chime in there? Then we'll go to Eva.
Nah, I can't make up my mind.
Okay.
I was going to probably be snarky, and then I just said, yeah,
Okay. Eva, go ahead.
Thank you. I've watched Trump's speech yesterday. I've attached it on the bubble, not above. I don't know how to do it, but anyway, it's under in the bubble. And the thing is that there's something very scary, not done by Trump, but done by the TV editors, that obviously there has to be a reason. So first I explained the what's objective, there's no doubt of that. And after you can check it and verify it. In the speech, he said that he was going to, it was the first time that he was going to talk about the murder attempt. And he said that it was very painful for him. So he was going to talk about it only once, only this time and never again. Okay? So, and we can see his face like we do in any Trump rally. You have close-ups, longer shots, this and that, but obviously it's a Trump rally. Obviously you have to see Trump's face. And when he's talking about everything before the shot, you can see his face in a close-up, saying it was a beautiful day. We were all happy. I was super excited to be there, blah, blah, blah. All this, I was talking about immigration and so in charge. So until then, we can see his face. From the moment he starts to talk about when he gets shot until 7 minutes later, all the time, until he talks about the dead man and the 2 wounded, which are people that he didn't know. Trump did not know personally. He did know after. And he learned about that just as the rest of the world we saw on the news, because he was actually taken out of there. So it's not like he knew them. So when he's playing his personal experience, what he lived, you don't see Trump, not even once, not even a part of a second, ever, for 7 minutes. The camera remains in a long shot, very long shot, of the audience, and you see the screens with pictures of Trump that we've all seen of that day, but we don't see him speaking for the first and one and only time that he's narrating his experience there. So until then, these are the facts. For 7 minutes, and when does the camera go back to him? When he starts talking about the dead man and the wounded, and how he talked to the wounded and this and that. But that's something that he learned later. It's not his personal experience. He didn't know them when he was there. So, okay, it's a little bit scary to say it in a space, but I have a theory of why that is. I don't know exactly what the TV editors know, or if they received the order. We cannot see, no one can see, unless except for the people that were physically there. No one can see Trump's face during the time that he explains his experience. But in any case, whether they did it voluntarily or they received the order to do it like that, for whatever reason, they know. So my theory, can I say my theory of what
Sure.
I think what it is?
Well, you've led up to it, so go ahead and say it.
Okay, my theory is when he speaks about his experience, the first day, I don't remember which news, but I know because that's much more recent. Yesterday in Mario Newfield's Pace, Lev Pernas was actually an enemy of Trump, so he actually didn't know that he was helping him. I've heard it before, also with the first day, and then the media kind of hid it. But the very first day, I've heard that Trump, even if I didn't hear or see Trump speaking, but I've heard news saying that Trump had mentioned that his very first impression was that it was a mosquito bite, that he didn't know what it was, but that it felt like a mosquito bite, that it could hurt, that was like big for a mosquito bite, but that he did not suspect that it was a bullet at all at the beginning. And in his speech yesterday, he said that he was absolutely sure that it was a bullet from the very first second. So which Trump version do I believe? The first or the second? I believe the first, and I think he's threatened right now. That his life is threatened right now, and he's forced to lie. And since I know that there are experts, and now with AI even more, there are experts that can tell with a great precision from facial expressions when someone lies, and even more in his state of mind, that his life has been threatened. So not only he's lying, but he's lying against his will, forced to lie, not wanting to lie, but forced to lie, and his life threatened.
Okay,
So
Eva.
Yeah.
Let me just stop you right there. So first of all, any president's life is going to be repeatedly threatened. That's a fact of being a world leader, especially of the United States. Your life is threatened each and every day. I will tell you, having worked at the Pentagon, my ex did the phones in the SecDef's office. The SecDef, which is not anywhere near the president, got daily death threats every day coming into his office repeatedly. At this point, 8 years into this environment, Trump is not going to lie to the American people. He has no reason to lie to the American people about what we just saw. I am not aware of anybody, and I would have to see that with credible evidence, that you could mistake, because I don't know if you've ever been shot at or had a bullet go anywhere near you. There's no mistaking a bullet whizzing through part of your ear for a mosquito bite. The percussion of the speed of a bullet can blow your eardrum out. There's no mistaking it. There's no thinking that it's a mosquito bite. There's no, oh my gosh, what just happened? It's blowing a chunk of your earlobe out, blood coming down your face, and there's no one that thinks that's a mosquito bite. So I don't know who's saying that. And there would be, since we've all seen it, the New York Times had their 8,000 shutter speed bullet catcher camera ready, so that they can make $1 billion off of a copyrighted photo of his head blowing up. There's unequivocally a bullet, and the people screaming all around them at the sound of the guns going off, and the people even preceding that telling everybody around them that the guy's got a gun. I'm not even sure how the people that were over on the stage didn't hear the people over in the field screaming, he's got a gun. So yeah, I understand what you're saying. I'm just not buying it. Renee, go ahead.
Hey there, can you hear me?
Sure.
Great. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much, Colonel and ladies, for all you do. I love being here with everybody. Speaking of the IT outages and stuff, recently I have a little website I'm selling some old apparel on, and it got hacked. And also my email went down yesterday. So I've been dealing with all this troubleshooting stuff, and I had to update my subscription to my domain name. And while I was in there, I started typing in OperationGladio.com, HaveYouBeenGladio.com, and stuff like this, because, you know, I think of all the amazing work you ladies do often. And as our commander-in-chief is trying to do and bring unification of humanity and the people, I thought, gosh, I think it's time we need a website, you know, and maybe, I don't know if you've thought about that, but it could be a good source, perhaps, for people all around the world where they can go to. And just some ideas, like you can click on your country, like Have You Been Gladio? And you can click on your country, and with all of us, we can kind of work together, and because we're diggers, and bring together information on different countries, you know, and expose and share with people that we're all included in this BS that happened to us. You know, there is no one who is not included in Operation Gladio all around the world. And I don't know, I just thought of you, and I wanted to share that. I don't know if you have any thoughts on creating
Renee,
a website.
Yeah. I think that's brilliant. I honestly think that's brilliant. Now, again, I'm the most IT challenged person on this entire thing. But I do think that's brilliant. So I definitely need to look into that because it's absolutely brilliant for that exact reason. It's the
Cool.
single place that you could pool all of the links and the information for people as we find them in real time based on countries. I love that idea. I'm going to have to figure out how to do it. Thank you so much for coming up and saying that.
Pleasure. I kept thinking about it while I'm doing all this damn technical support over the past week. I hate it. I'm not technically savvy either, so it's such a nightmare for me. But I'm like, okay, this could be something that could help unify and awaken the world to Operation Gladio, where you can tap into each your country and see the shenanigans that these psychopaths did in your country to go, oh my God,
I love it.
Connected to that. I didn't know that.
I love it.
You know? Okay, cool. And then one last thing before I jump off. Stellar brought up earlier about this whole outage thing and whatever, and Seth Rich. I don't know if anybody has ever seen the plaque in DC that was dedicated after Seth Rich was killed, but it's so weird because, it's like a dedication. This is dedicated some like park or it's like a space where you can lock up your bicycles. It's weird, but the plaque says something like, I'll send it in the purple pill. It says, Seth Rich, blah, blah, blah. I guess the dates or whatever his, when he was born and died. And then it says, friend to all, including Panda. Did anyone ever see this?
Yes.
It's crazy. I don't know if you ever thought of that or what that is supposed to mean, Weird.
I was told that was his nickname at the DNC.
I just like minutes before this had seen that was his like code name, nickname, something because
weird.
They were even talking about they were talking about somebody recently posting something about Seth Rich and no more bears around here, no more polar bears or something along those lines.
And when
really creepy.
Yeah, when you look at the connotation of Panda from potentially when he was a child or in relation to the World Wildlife Fund, either way, not good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much.
Sure.
You all have a great weekend.
Miss Lou and then Carrie.
Having a little internet issues here.
Okay.
Good morning, Colonel.
Morning.
Stellar, Bridget, thank you all so much. This is my secondary, by the way, ID on Twitter because I was banned for talking about the CCP. So my other one is Miss Lou, and that's the one with the Indian and the horse rider.
Okay.
So it's the same.
Whoops. Can you hear her?
Just to let you know, not that I'm a big pointy.
You're going in and out, Miss Lou.
And all the information coming across.
Miss Lou, can you hear me?
Oh.
Miss Lou, we're going to have to drop you down and bring you back up again because you're coming in and out. All right.
Okay.
So Bridget or Stella will put you back in, okay?
Let's see if we can find her and bring her back up. Where'd she go? Y'all find her and I'll go ahead and do.
I found her, I think, and I'm giving her a mic.
Okay.
Miss Lou, if you can grab the microphone. I just sent it to you.
You want to go ahead, Carrie? We'll get her back up here.
Yeah, I'll go ahead. I'm pretty short. So my understanding, there's a question at the end of this, but my understanding of Jesus embracing the hooker was not transactional. Like, here, guys, let's use her story for our story. It was actually, no, let's embrace everyone, not have enemies everywhere. And also, let's look beyond the role that people are not playing, but stepping into in life. And I just wondered how, because I've never worn a uniform. I was wondering how that is for you still, like in your life, how I mean, it's a hard question, but how that interaction is, that interplay with people, but not just people, life itself, like how that it just seems really hard to me. Like, how hard is that? Or maybe it's easy. I don't know, but it just seems really hard.
Well, first of all, let me address your first part of your thing. No, that's okay.
Sorry.
I was not inferring that Trump was being transactional. I don't think Trump was using her. I think Trump has opened a tent and he wants everybody inside of the tent. But he can't force people to be in the tent. People have to want to be in the tent. And through her own research, she decided to walk into the tent. We can't now have a moral code for people to get into the tent based on their past life. We're not the door checkers. Nobody gave us the authority to check IDs at the and I don't have that's the role of God when you go to heaven. I don't have the book of life. I'm not the one that's going to be saying you get in and you don't get in. I'm not going to play that role on earth because I'm not going to play that role in heaven. And so I think we as people on earth need to accept people despite their history, if they are going to do their own research and join us. We can't then tell them to go away. We sit here every day proselytizing to everybody to get them into the tent, and then when they walk in the tent, we go, "You can't get in the tent." That whole thing is just ridiculous to me.
I'm actually crying.
Okay. All right. So you can't pretend to want everybody in the tent, and when they come in the tent, say you can't come in the tent. That's my only point. I don't think Trump's using anybody. So I just wanted to make that clear to everybody. Now, I think
I wasn't saying
No,
that.
I know. I know.
I was trying to clarify.
I know.
Because I've done a lot of spiritual studies, so I was just trying to clarify.
Right. So I want to make sure
His
everybody
intent.
understands what we meant.
Yeah.
So your second question, I think you're asking me how, as a military person, I'm able to deal with what I'm uncovering. Is that what you were asking?
It's broader than that, but
Well, try again, because that's what I got out of that.
how do you take space from your role? Like, how do you walk around and like pick fruit and like smile and stuff? Because like, to me, what you do is so difficult. It's so hard. How do you step out of that?
I don't step out of it. I live this every day. Yeah, I live this every day. This is my life. And I firmly believe God is leading me on a mission to blow their shit up. So I'm excited. Every day I jump out of bed in the morning. I want to know everything about all of this because my mission is to blow it all up. I want their world to explode. And if I can play even the smallest little bit of being the igniter that blows their shit up, I am going to run to my computer every day to do it. That's my life. That's what
I love you. I amen. You.
All right. So when I have told this story before, when I was on active duty and the Air Force decided to make me a personnel officer and not a maintenance officer, it pissed me off. They blew up my dream of what I wanted to do as an Air Force officer. And I was like, fuck you. I am going to spend the rest of my 22 years on active duty, which I did, being a pain in their ass. I got up every day excited to blow up their world. They had dysfunctional processes in personnel that screwed enlisted people, and I was going to fix them. And I didn't care whose head blew up. I was still going to fix it. I was going to change regulations that didn't make any sense to help enlisted people. And I did that. I spent my entire life righting wrongs. They made a horrible mistake when they made me a personnel officer because I blew up their world. And I fixed a lot of shit. And I made a lot of enlisted people very happy for fixing their shit. And that's kind of the way I feel about this. I'm the wrong person for you to provide me information to and not want it to be exposed. And so I'm excited every day about this. And I don't look at it as dangerous. I don't look at it as like some black thing to get weighed down on me, because I think every single person that's new to our space every day is one more person that gets a light bulb turned on. One more person that gets on our Substack, one more person that watches a show on Rumble is one more person that had the light bulb turned on. And if I can turn your light bulb on, then I have done what I needed to do that day. So thank you for asking that question, Carrie.
Thank you for being.
Sure.
And thank you for being Carrie.
Thank you for being Carrie. Yep, absolutely.
Thank you, honeys. Thank you.
All right. Anybody, any last questions? We're now past our 2-hour time frame.
Yeah, I got a question for you.
Sure.
Would you be willing to come into a space with your crew, my twisted sister from another mister and Bridget, if I did a space either tonight or tomorrow?
That's not even a question. Of course I would.
I'm going to pick your brain about some ideas and topics of what to do. I've just been trying to center myself with God and get away from all the drama and the noise that is typical when a big event happens. But I have some ideas of what I want to talk about.
Okay.
So I don't really care about being on here or grabbing impressions or growing the space that way. But I do want to have a logical discussions, and that's why I like coming into your space. That's why my spaces have literally been focused basically on Operation Gladio and a few other things. So yeah, if you'll just look out for a DM, I'll DM you. And
absolutely,
because maybe I'll have you be included on what I would like to talk about, the view of what happened on that Saturday. That's logical, that we can define for people that have seen more than I have. I've been bookmarking the shit out of everything. I'm just not really interacting. So
yeah, and I think putting it in context where you have both phase 1 and phase 2, where you're talking about the historical, because again, I still believe that there's a lot of people that go, there's no way people do this stuff. Yeah. So yeah, you're absolutely right. And then it blows people's mind to think there could be a second shooter. There's always a second shooter. That's not like even up for debate. They don't send
in this case, there were 3.
Maybe. But there's definitely a second. They don't send somebody in as a solo. It never happens, ever.
Yeah, there's so many breakdowns. So I think I'm going to do a space about the situation in the event. And it will be more of what we do know, what we can see. And then the second part, people can kind of speculate as far as that goes. So yeah. I think I'm either going to do that tonight or I'm going to do that tomorrow. But I'll let you know. It's been really busy. Been really good busy, but it's been really busy for me business wise, and I've just been working 14-hour days, so I'm going to bed.
All right.
Go to bed at like 9, 10 o'clock and being up at 5 o'clock every day. So
all right.
Yeah.
Fitter, I see you asked for a mic. Did you have something that you wanted to say, or I don't see a hand up, but I don't want to leave you out if you come up to say something before we sign off.
Fitter Steve?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, I just wanted to relate a story for that. When we were kids, we were out hunting grouse with a 410 and a rimfire. And we're out in the woods, and all of a sudden we heard this sound, a pop. We knew it was a 22. And then you hear this weird noise as these bullets are going over your head. And I looked at my uncle, who's 2 years older than me. He goes, "What's shooting at us?" So we figured we just got too close to some hillbilly hippies pot grow, because it was the 70s. And you never mistake that sound for anything else.
Thank you.
I mean, when the bullet flies, you hear it.
Yes. Yes, you hear it. And
without a doubt.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you
Sure.
so much for this.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. So even when we were in northern Iraq, I can't actually say, because I laugh every time I recall this story. I can't say I was shot at because it was so hysterical. They were actually shooting at us, but in a hysterical kind of way. We normally took helicopters to and from work in northern Iraq from Zaku to Dahuk, where we slept, and then we worked in Zaku. So it's up over a huge big mountain. Long drive, took about 4 hours in a Humvee, plus your back was like destroyed for two weeks afterwards. But I wanted to, because I'd just flown everywhere because I was the general's aide, so the general always flew, and so I always flew. I'd never driven around northern Iraq, and I wanted to go through some of the towns and see some of the scenery. Plus there was this big palace he was building up this mountain. I wanted to go up there. I'd flown around it in the helicopter, but I wanted to actually physically go up there. And so I had a crew that was taking one of the Humvees back to Zaku from Dahuk. And I was like, hey, I asked the general if he minded if I rode with them just so I could see the countryside. So we're off gallivanting around the countryside hours and hours into this trip. And, it's 120 degrees, doors open on the Humvee. And off in the distance, you see, and I mean, it was off in the distance where these little, I don't even know what they were shooting. They were ridiculous. You could see the bullets like landing between us and them. So it was a joke. So basically all they were doing was wasting ammunition because there was no way. And the equipment that we had on our Humvee would have mowed them all down in like 5 seconds. But because they weren't a threat, we weren't going to just shoot them. Even though we were being fired at, because again, it was a joke. It was like, but distinct sound of those bullets being fired at you. And when it first happened, I'm looking at where they were landing. And again, it was not imminent threat, nothing like that. I'm still thinking, what the hell? Because first of all, why would you waste the ammunition if you know that you're not even anywhere near? And I understand the intimidation factor and all that other crap, but it was just such a joke. But the initial thought of and hearing those gunshots, I will never not remember exactly what that sounded like. Because again, it was the first time being in the military and having, even though it was ridiculously far and not a physical threat, they were actually shooting at us. So, and again, I've heard the munitions from an Apache being fired. I've heard the guns of an A-10 being fired. Those are sounds that you just never forget. So yeah. Anyway, thank you, Fitter. Who was next, Bridget?
Apollonia, I think.
Okay.
Yeah,
And then
question.
I think and then we're done. All right.
Yes.
Go.
Hi. Honestly, I didn't realize I had my hand up, but I'm not going to miss this time to say have a wonderful Friday. I love you guys. I enjoy listening to you counter and sign off. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for
And we
saying
just
that.
love
You
hearing
have,
from you.
yes, you have a wonderful weekend. Cousin It, go.
So one of the things that I noticed, and this is, and I'm going to reiterate with what the colonel said, because I do hunt. I'm by no means a firearm expert, but I've shot enough guns and heard enough guns to tell everyone here that she's absolutely right. You know, as a matter of fact, we knew listening to the very first time it was played that not only were there two guns, there were two different caliber guns. You just know the sounds of the weapons, and it's a very distinct sound. So I know there's a lot of stuff going around. Be assured the people that do handle firearms do know the difference in the sounds. The other thing I do want to bring up, which is a sort of off-topic thing, there were a couple other people that were injured at that rally. And it is my understanding from a recent post, which I did put together, you know, I did whatchamacallit, quote posted or whatever the hell it's called here. There's a Jim Copenhaver, who's 74, who's actually still in intensive care. So if everybody could just say a prayer for that man and his family, that he recovers and that everything goes well for him. Because yes, Trump was injured, but at the end of the day, there were other injuries and there was somebody that was killed. And these bastards did it. There's no question that they've done it. It's just a matter of, like, you know, while they're playing Keystone Cops, there are other people that are hurt. So let's just take a moment, say a prayer for them, and be supportive in any way we can for those people, and try to keep it civil for the respect of those people. Because, you know, people don't want to go shooting their mouth off either. So that's all I had to say. Thank you very much.
Okay.
And everybody have a wonderful afternoon, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Cousin It. And that is a good point. One of the other things that gets lost in the conversation is the shrapnel wounds of the police officers that was standing over there by the guy that was killed. So the incoming rounds evidently was ricocheting off of the bleacher structures and creating shrapnel. And that shrapnel embedded itself. I see it, Bridget. Embedded itself in some of the policemen that was standing up on the bleachers, because there was a whole big issue with that as well. Miss Lou, go ahead.
I'm gonna try again. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you guys so much again. Sorry, I'm out rural and the internet is wiggy. Listen, I just think that Gladio is so alive and well at this very moment, because I'm getting, you know, JFK vibe here. I wanted to ask you, Colonel, have you heard of John Cullen? He's a ballistics expert.
I know who he is.
Okay. He did a whole map chart thing with photographs, with diagrams, whole 9 yards, believe him or don't believe him, whatever. He's also of the belief or of the theory that there was more than one shooter. He thinks there are actually 3 points of contact. But the fact that every day something else comes out, like the parents tried to contact the law enforcement, it's just such a cluster F. Without saying,
yeah, I can't see any of his stuff because he blocked me when I told him about Operation Gladio.
I talked about Gladio yesterday and I didn't get blocked.
Yeah. Well,
I said, I know a gal who's a colonel and she's absolutely right on with all this stuff.
Yeah, well, he said it. He had a few nasty things to say when I told him that the context of the Las Vegas, because he has everything the way he thinks it is, and if you let him know that there's a bigger context, it just blows his world up. So.
Well, I don't like that. So
yeah.
But in any case.
But I can see some of the stuff that he does when other people shares it. I just can't participate in it. Not that I
understand.
Yeah.
But it was just the whole wrapping up the point is that they're already admitting it was a stand down. Some of the whistleblowers, that it was a stand down. That's very different different than incompetence.
Yes.
Even though it was incompetent.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that right there, Gladio, stand down, boom.
Yeah.
Now today's cyber attack, which is gone, I haven't felt it here, although I did feel it this morning when I was talking to a retailer online. They went dark and then a recording came up that they were having technical difficulties. I'm like, Then I heard about the cyber attack and apparently it's global. But this is just to distract us, to get us off the Trump point. You know, it's all the next step, the next step, the next step. They're just going to keep hammering us, as you well know, through history with the next step, the next step, and the next step. And each step, because they're panicked now. They are worried, okay? Because they see so much going, coalescence around Trump, which is the last thing they wanted to happen since their assassination attempt failed. So now they've got to go into plan B, C, D, all that. What do you think? Do you have an opinion about what you think? Now we've got a cyber attack. I know people who are saying we're going to go into a major power outage now, like an EMP.
So we're going to see another Gladio event. And I believe it will be around the DNC.
A lot of people are saying that too.
Yeah.
Yep. That they're gonna sacrifice Biden or some, like you said, some October.
I just say it as a Gladio event.
Right.
Yeah.
Very, very good. Yeah. It's exactly. How can you predict? But there are some who are saying that if it's a Gladio event, it's an opportunity for them to turn around and blame the right.
It will be. It will be out of retribution for what someone did to Trump. That will be the blame in order to
right.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. That's all I want to know.
Sure.
Good job and good space and always great.
Thank you, Miss Lou. Stellar, you're going to close us out?
Yeah, I'm going to close you guys out. There's a lot of multiple things going on, multiple layers. The cyber attack is affecting Vegas. The casinos are having issues. It started just after midnight. Wasn't that beautiful? Airports, international flights, the whole airport system is all jacked up. Like I said, some of the banks here are jacked up. Hospitals and the labs, like Quest Diagnostics and stuff, their systems are down. You have to bring a hard copy in to have anything done. So, with all this stuff going on, it's showing the infrastructure as being extremely vulnerable as well, Gladio. But with this hack or whatever, a lot has to do, I think, with a lot of the shady money that's going here, there, everywhere. So, I still think that we're still a lot of disclosures and, the whole system, monetary system, I think the DNC is going to get into a lot of trouble, or a lot of exposures are going to come out with that, like they did with the SVB bank stuff that was, hacked before. It showed the ties to Ukraine, SV Bank, the laundering and stuff. So there's there's multiple layers, and, we got to keep everybody in our prayers. We got to keep Colonel Towner, everyone that is giving us good information to learn from. Keep everyone in your prayers. Keep your families in your prayers, because it seems like, it's going to keep getting crazier and it's going to amp up. Make sure your gas tanks are full just to be safe. Have cash on you just in case. Get some of your food storage stuff. Make sure you have water. So it's just legitimate things, because we're going to be hitting some rocky roads and stuff like that. What was it? They're even saying in Las Vegas, some of the golf courses are affected. They can't change the tee times and stuff. It was backed up yesterday. So even the golf courses here are getting affected. So just kind of keep an eye on that. Keep your family and loved ones safe. Make sure you have water, food, some cash. Make sure your gas tanks are full. If you guys do go to the doctors and stuff like that, make sure you have your printed stuff. Do it old school, because the electronics are being affected in Microsoft, and you guys all know what Microsoft had to do with elections too. All this stuff is looping back around. It seems like 2016 era. So just remember all the crap that was going on then. I think there's a lot of big exposures coming out, and keep everyone safe, and just, again, pray and give gratitude that it seems like, it's going to get kind of crazy for the next few months.
So wait a minute.
Love you guys.
So wait a minute. If we upload an update into CrowdStrike, we can take all of the electronic voting machines down and have to use paper?
Ding ding. That's what I'm thinking, because voting is going to be on the blockchain. The 13 the swing states on the 2020 elections were blockchain.
Okay.
So again, blockchain. It's not just financial. Everything is circumferenced around blockchain and security.
Okay. All right, guys. Right.
You guys love me, don't you? You guys
We do.
love me.
We absolutely love you. Yes, we absolutely love you. Yep. All right, guys. All right. We'll be.
Be nice, or I'm going to squash you. I'm joking.
Hey.
She can't even be sarcastic without an apology.
I'm not going to tell him what. I'm not going to tell him what we do to frogs around here.
Stellar, I'll teach you. No worries.
All right. Have a nice weekend, everybody. We will be with Frog in whatever venue he does over the weekend, and then we will see you back on Monday. And on Monday, our new show time is going to be 4:00. So see you then.
That's 1 o'clock for people on the Best Coast.
Yeah.
Just so you know.
Yeah. Whatever.
Best Coast. I'm sorry. Was that the Exodus coming from that direction?
We're on the right side. We're on the right coast.
All right.
I'm joking. The whole country's the right side. The whole world, because we're all coming together. It's beautiful.
Yep.
We're gonna be free. The shenanigans are gonna be over, and yay.
All right, you gotta cut her off now. She's
I know.
way too
She's getting a little drunk on that joy. All right.
Yeah.
Nice weekend, everybody. See you Monday.
God bless you.
Bless you.